Good morning, y'all. What's going on? Global Hack Week. It is Wednesday over here, and we are feeling great. You know what? Like every single time I do Global Hack Week, I just realize it doesn't matter how early I have to get up and how many live streams I have to do intros for. I still have a great time because really that's what it's all about. So I see that some of y'all are already active in the chat. I love to see it. Love to see it. We've got a great treat for you today. Good friends of ours coming in from Retool, which is, great application that you can use to sort of, build out applications for like very, very easily. So it's not an application per se, but it is a platform that allows you to build out really great applications. Like, and like you could do it in a very, very easy way with little to no code. And honestly, like I'm just really excited to be introducing Kevin Winnery, and he'll be coming up here and talking about the platform itself. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and add him to the stream here and disappear for a little bit. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat and say good morning to Kevin.
Hey, how's it going, folks? Rosendo, thanks for the intro, man. I appreciate it.
No worries.
All right. How's it going, folks? Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Kevin Winnery. I'm the head of developer experience for a company called Retool. And as you just heard a second ago, Retool is a platform for building internal tools or like custom software that you would build, usually for like an internal audience. But really that's a clunky way of saying it's the way that you build those little like CRUD apps or admin panels that kind of drive your application. So if you've been developing software for a little while, you might have been in a situation where you have your public website that is your main application that your end users interact with. But then there's also like a back end like admin interface where you create the promo codes or approve content. Those kinds of back end applications is kind of what Retool is for. So this morning, what I was hoping to do is kind of introduce Retool. I'll show you kind of a few of the basic features of the platform. And also take a minute to show you two like new beta features that you can try out if you sign up for Retool, which is free, by the way. So you can definitely head out to retool.com and sign up there. But I'll show you a little bit of Retool database, which is a Postgres database, which is included and hosted like with your Retool instance. And we'll also take a look at a new product called Workflows, which is essentially Zapier with JavaScript. And we'll take a look at kind of how you would build out some of those backend workflows as well. I do have chat up over on the right-hand side here. So if you see me kind of looking stage right, that is what I'm doing. So if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to pop them into the chat and I'll see if I can answer those as we go along. But again, rather than kind of talking you to death and saying what Retool is, it might be a little easier to just show you. So I'll ask Rosendo to actually show my screen real quick. And here we are again on the Retool homepage. And everything that I'm doing today, I'm actually using the free version of Retool. So you can do everything that I'm about to do using an account that you sign up for. No need to put in a credit card or anything like that. So feel free to sign up and check it out. Hopefully you've seen some of the challenges too for Global Hack Week. And those are all completable too, just using a free Retool account. So you can head out there and sign up. For the two like sort of preview features that I'm going to show, like for databases and workflows, those are actually not enabled by default. So if you want to get access to those, I'm actually happy to hook you up. If you just email me at kevin.winery@retool.com at any point in the next week, I can go ahead and hook you up with access to those two products if that is something that's interesting to you. But the kind of thing that Retool was sort of founded to do and sort of the first feature of the platform was giving you this visual development environment that you can use to quickly assemble front-end applications that talk to a variety of different data sources. And that's kind of the core of what most folks use the platform for today. So within my Retool cloud interface, which you can sign up for, again, retool.com. The homepage kind of shows you all of the applications that you've developed on the platform. And I'll actually just create a brand new one from scratch just so we can see kind of how that works. So I'm going to go over here and just create a new application. We'll just call it MLH demo. And what that's going to do is bring up an interface that looks like this one. And this is a little squishy. So I'm going to kind of zoom out a little bit. But what we're mostly looking at here is like a visual app builder where I can kind of use a palette of predefined widgets to kind of quickly assemble a user interface that sits on top of lots of different data stores. So the default table that's in here kind of shows how you would set up a paginated table for a set of data. But I'm going to get rid of that because we're not actually going to use that. And I'm just going to create an application that's going to allow us to just kind of see how we would implement some simple create, read, update style interactions within Retool. So the place I'll start is with a header. So like this header section is kind of baked into every Retool application, and you can kind of make it sticky so that as you scroll the page, you will always have the header in view. But the idea with this UI layout is that every like internal tool or console application tends to have a similar sort of layout. Like they tend to have like a sticky header. A lot of them often have like a left navigation, which I don't have set up here. But Retool has like a lot of ways to kind of let you cheat and create like common types of user interface layouts without having to do a lot of work. So the place I'm going to start is over here with this text widget that I just dragged onto the canvas. And I can actually set that up with Markdown. So over here, you can see like there's some Markdown syntax, which, displays some bold text. And then the other thing I want to point out is something that you're going to see a lot within the Retool interface, which is this, double curly brace notation, which is basically a way for you to inject JavaScript into any way, or into basically like any text field within the Retool interface. Retool, when you first look at it, might seem like it's a no-code type solution. That's actually pretty far from the case. It's actually a lot closer to like Xcode or Unity, but specifically for web application development. Like a lot of the tools that you use are visual, but you will be writing quite a lot of code that kind of sits behind these interfaces that you create. So for this Markdown field, we'll call it, Kevin's to-dos in all caps, because that's just how intense we are early here on Wednesday morning in Central Time. I'm coming at you live from Minneapolis, actually. Would be cool to see in the chat where other folks are joining from. But let's maybe just assemble like a quick interface that would let us, maybe manage a to-do list. So like if I'm, having with a to-do list application, oftentimes I probably want like a text input to add like new to-do items. So over here on the right, a text input is one of the user interface components I can quickly drag in. I don't think I really want a label. And for the placeholder, I'll say, enter something to do. And then that'll show up kind of in the placeholder over here. And then I'm probably going to need a button that I can drag into to like add a to-do item. And when I, select the button, I can, customize the text. And then I could also theoretically have, some adornments like a prefix icon that makes it a little bit big, so I can stretch it out just a little bit. I'm kind of dragging and resizing sort of willy-nilly here, but one thing to keep in mind for when you're actually designing and laying out one of these interfaces is that Retool's interface builder is kind of built around like a 16 column grid. So if you're using like a CSS grid system, it's something that you might already be a little bit familiar with, but it's generally helpful to kind of think about a Retool interface sort of scrolling vertically down the screen in these 16 columns. And by default, when I resize all of these different components, I'm essentially assigning them like how many columns within this column interface, in this column system, I would like them to occupy. All right, so very quickly, I kind of have, this text field that's going to allow me to add some to-do list items. And then I'm probably going to need some kind of interface to lay them all out. And for that, Retool has something called a list view. And this is a way that you can sort of repeat items in a list of data and kind of render the same interface components for each item in a list. And we don't have any items yet, but we'll fix that here shortly. Just looking over in the chat here, it looks like we have lots of folks from India, Nigeria, Morocco. Oh man, it is an awesome global group. I appreciate having you all on the stream this morning. So with this to-do list, I can actually have render a dynamic list of items. So like in this interface, I could, have some text in the text box. And then when I click add to do, I could have, one of those to-do list items show up over here on the right, or yeah, within this list on the left, excuse me. So within this list view, I can also sort of drag and drop user interface components here as well. So for a to-do list item, I might want, well, there's a few ways that I could do this, but I'll go with like a checkbox. And the checkbox, whoops, it does a couple things for me. Like it'll give me a label, which I could use to sort of set the text of the to-do item. And it gives me like a checkbox that I could use to confirm whether or not that to-do list item has been done. So with the label, we'll set up kind of the data binding for that. But I think we've gone about as far as we can go without actually having or configuring some kind of data source. So within Retool, there's a few ways that you can persist data. There is a built-in Postgres database, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. But for our purposes right now, what I'm going to use is here, I'll delete out this default query. I'm going to come down into the bottom panel here, which is where we have the ways in which you can fetch data in Retool. And those are generally called queries. And this bottom panel down here in the UI is where you can create and edit those queries. Another thing you can do is actually set up temporary state variables. So you can have like in-memory variables that can store data that you can render in your application. So if you've used something like React before, this would be like a use state, array, or like basically pointers to data that you can then reference elsewhere in your application. So I'm going to create one of those now. I'm going to create a temporary state variable, and we'll call that to-dos. And we will set that to an initial value of just an empty array in JavaScript. And then I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of pop new to-do list items inside of this array every time we type something in here and click this add to do button. And then eventually we'll actually render out all of those individual to-do list items based on the contents of this array. Okay, so coming back to our user interface here, we've shown how we can lay out the UI pretty quickly, but we haven't shown yet how we could actually do any sort of behavior. So the text input actually doesn't need to do a lot. So I think a lot of the action is going to actually be over here with the button. And if I wanted to, in a different view, I just click this left panel button over here on the top, just so you can see that didn't appear as if from nowhere. I can kind of see a hierarchical view of my application as well. So in the header, I can see my text box that I put in, and then I can also see all of these individual UI components. So I can click on that button, and this button is where I want to add some interactivity. So over here on the right, in addition to kind of configuring the visual aspects of my button, I can also set up event handlers, which is going to allow me to set up JavaScript code that can execute when my button is clicked. In addition to JavaScript, I can also run queries against like data sources that are set up in Retool, whether it's like APIs or different databases. But in this case, I actually am just going to write a little bit of JavaScript. So, when my button is clicked, I'm actually going to run a script, which is just some JavaScript. And then I'm going to reference like the current contents of this text input, which is called text input one. Whoops, I kind of lost my script there. So I can just for like testing purposes, I'm going to start by like console.logging the current value of text input one. So that's going to be text input.value. One thing you'll notice right away is there's actually like quite a lot of like autocomplete and niceties within like all the JavaScript editing interfaces that you'll see in Retool. So most of the different pieces of your application, you can just like start typing, and oftentimes the development environment will actually autocomplete for you to the thing that you want. So text input.value, that's just going to give me the text of whatever is in that text field. So if I enter something in there, hey there, and then I click the button, it should have actually logged out to the console those different messages. And I can see console logging in a couple ways. Like if I actually opened up the Chrome DevTools, I would see the console log messages there too. But what I did is I just clicked this little bug down in the lower right, and that brings up like a special like Retool specific console logging interface, which has a few other nice debug features, which we can get into another time. But I can see my two messages kind of coming up here with the current state of the text field. Another thing I'll point out is, there's this Explorer view on the left that lets me see all of the UI components that are in my application. But there's also this State Explorer, and this is really nice. If you've done any React development, there are Chrome dev tools that allow you to kind of inspect the state of your application. Retool has a very similar thing that lets you kind of inspect the current state of your user interface and all of your data at the same time. So for this to-dos list, this is actually that array that I configured down here, which is ultimately going to store all the state for my application. And then for all my components, I can see the state of those as well. So for this text input 1, I can kind of expand that and see that, the value is, hey there, the label is, not shown. It also just kind of gives me all the data about how that text field is configured. And then there's also some global variables that are defined as well. Like I can see my local storage and the currently logged in user, which ends up being really handy. Retool actually has some built-in authentication as well. So you can kind of build these authenticated applications pretty quickly also. All right, so in my handler over here, I've started to get, I created a script that's gonna run on a click that gets access to this value. But what I'd really like to do is like push that data into the array that I created, that to-dos object. So if I start writing to-dos, it starts to autocomplete to this like state variable that it already knows about. And I can use array methods to actually push data into this array. So I'm going to push in a value of, I think we'll say, the text of the message or the text of the to-do is going to be, text input 1.value, and then maybe there'll be a complete property, which will initially be set to false because we're adding a new to-do list item. And so basically I'll just be kind of shoving those into that in-memory array that I created, so I can render them out to the list. So that should be okay. But now we actually need to make our dynamic list like be data driven instead of just driven by these hard-coded values. So the first thing we need to do is say that the number of rows in the list is, instead of being a hard-coded number, it's going to be the to-dos dot value length. So it'll just be the number of items in that array are the ones that we're going to render out. And then for each of the items in the array, we have to actually do some data binding to set up their values to point to those items in the array. So for the default value, we're going to start by saying that's going to be, let's see, to-dos dot value, and then that's going to give me the actual array itself. And then I want to reference this value I. So within this list view component, there's kind of this magic variable declared called I, which is like the current index of the item in the list that you're rendering. So this will actually render out the the current value of the current item in the array that we're iterating through. And I think text was the value that we assigned when we created it. So let's go ahead and we'll add some to-do list items. When we click those, theoretically, we should start to see some to-dos flowing in there. So the value, this doesn't actually seem to be working yet. So let's debug this first. So when we add the to-do list item, we want to run this script, and then, oh, you know what? I'm actually doing this incorrectly. So the to-dos are an array itself. So we need to actually start by getting that array. So we'll do, const to list equals, to-dos dot value, but I actually can't directly modify that array. So what I want to do instead is take that to-do list, and then we'll actually want to create like a new array and then reassign the entire thing. So there's a few ways we can do that. So this thing is a value, and then an array concat will actually, how do we want to clone this? So we could actually, I always forget what the way is to like copy an array into a new array. It's like array, what is it? Like maybe the chat can help me out here. But what we'll instead do, we'll copy it by reference, and then we'll push this this item into it. And what we can actually do is say to-dos dot set value, and then that is actually going to update the value itself. So we'll use this value to update that. And if this doesn't work, we can actually do a proper array copy up here, which I'll just have to maybe think a minute about how that's supposed to work. So let's instead try this up, and it looks like it is actually working. So we're adding in some to-do list items. It's just our data binding isn't quite working. So if we look at all these different values, these are just all the values that are getting popped into that array. So that's mostly working. But within our sort of list view, we need to figure out how we can set all these values properly. So the value for the text, that's actually whether or not it is checked. What we actually wanted to do here is dynamically set the value. This Platinum, that's right. You can just spread the current array across like a new array declaration. Yeah, that's probably the nicest way to do it. I've been doing JavaScript for a while, but I have to admit I'm on the MDN docs all the time still. I always forget what all the like array built-ins and whatnot do. So in this case, we set up the label and have the the text of the to-do, and that's starting to populate here. But now for the value, what we actually want to do is have this set to like whether or not the to-do list item is complete. So this now properly like initializes all these different values to be unchecked by default. So you can start to see kind of how these applications come together. You can sort of visually arrange them using the palette of components. You set up event handlers in JavaScript, and then you can kind of render the data associated with your application here. And then when you actually distribute the application to your end users, their experience looks kind of something like this, where they will see the actual thing that you created, and then they can interact with it without all of the chrome of like the editor and stuff like that. And the question is, are the checkboxes, are they checked by default? And no, they're not. I think I was just before when I kind of messed it up. I had set up this default value to be something that would evaluate to a truthy value in JavaScript. So like I set it to be the text, I think. And when I did that, because that evaluates to a string or could, that is a truthy value, which would make that checkbox end up being checked. All right. So that is a little bit of a taste of like how you use like the user interface builder. And there's obviously we just kind of scratched the surface of what's possible with the UI builder. But I did want to take a few minutes to point out just a couple things that I'm also super stoked about within Retool that have launched recently. One is Retool database. So we saw a little bit this apps part of the Retool interface where you can build these quick little user interface applications, but within resources, this allows you to kind of pre-configure data sources that you would use in the applications you build in Retool. And these different resources can be basically any kind of database. So we have kind of native support for connecting to Postgres and BigQuery, CouchDB, and also like APIs like Twilio if you need to send some text messages, or Stripe if you want to access payments. Lots of different types of applications and integrations. But one thing that's relatively new is the Retool database. So if I go ahead and view that, that actually gives me a nice visual editor that I can use to create and manage a Postgres database that I could then use within my Retool applications. So I had a little table in here for to-do list items, but I could, create a new table and call it whatever I want, like, HTTP cats, say. And this would be based on one of my favorite websites, which is the HTTP status cats, which I tend to use quite a bit if I need example data. And within this UI, you can actually, visually manage like the schema of your database. So you can create new fields like, I'll actually create a table with a few of my favorite HTTP status cats in it. So I'll have one be like the URL of an image, and then I'll create like a number field that's going to be, HTTP status that's associated with that, with that cat. So when I create a record, I'll just grab a couple of here. 202 accepted. This is definitely a solid one. So I'll add a record, and then the status is going to be 202. URL is going to be that one. And then maybe I'll just grab maybe where's the 200 OK cat? I'll go with this guy. Guess I don't even need to go in there because the URLs are, pretty well structured. But for HTTP status 200, I could have the URL like that. But basically, it's like a nice, almost Airtable-like interface where I can visually interact with a Postgres database. And then, after I set up the database, I can actually very easily access that data within an app as well. So if we go and edit this demo app, this won't have anything to do with my to-do list per se, but I can pull in a new table, and then I can very quickly sort of like wire up my user interface to talk to that database. So down here, I would do something. I would create a new resource query, and this would allow me to like create SQL queries against any data source that's configured in my account. But one of the things that I can do is I can choose my Retool database, and I can select star from HTTP cats, and then that's going to like return me a bunch of data that I can use within my application. So in my table, instead of having this hard-coded data, I can actually have this point to, I think it's called query1.data. And then I kind of automatically get, all of these different images, or I automatically get all this data rendering in a table. And for these, for the different columns, we can have different types of display. So this I'm going to actually treat as like an image URL. So when I'm browsing the data, I can actually see the HTTP status cat that's associated with that. I can also like kind of configure which columns within my data set are visible, and then I can have custom like human readable headings for my table columns as well. So another example of how you can kind of really quickly throw together user interfaces on top of different kinds of data. And that's really like, especially, if as you're just learning or checking out Retool and hacking around, Retool ends up being like a really great way to like build that little application that you wanted to build, like the little user interface that does a stupid little thing, but you wouldn't ever like spin up a new Next.js application to do it. Retool actually ends up being super fun to just kind of spin up little applications that hit different data sources and just quickly create software that you don't have to spend very much time in order to get these types of things going. So that's just a quick check of Retool database, and then the last thing I wanted to show is workflows. So workflows, which I mentioned before, is a brand new product. It's actually in developer preview this week. We plan on kind of announcing it to the world next week. But it allows you to create sort of back-end processes that can be executed like as a cron job or with a webhook, so that in addition to user interfaces, you can also create these back-end tasks as well. So if I create my new workflow here, the canvas that I'm looking at here kind of starts with a start block, which, as I said, you can set up to run on an interval, or you can set it up to run in response to a webhook request. And then within the sort of palette, or within like the canvas here, you can set up different queries, and these queries can actually do the same type of stuff that we can do in the UI. So like we have our Retool DB, where we could execute SQL, where we could say select star from I think we called it HTTP cats. And that's another nice thing here. You notice, like, because I have my database configured in Retool, it's also like auto completing my SQL queries. So like it's aware of like what tables I have and like what the columns in those tables are. So that ends up being really nice. And, as you're building out your workflow, one part about this that's nice is you can hit play, like kind of incrementally within your workflow. And you can kind of test at every step to see like, hey, what are the different, things that are being selected. So you can inspect the data as you go. And you can start to build new parts of the workflow by sort of dragging out new queries, and you can do like loops and branches and filters. So you could say like for each of these items in the loop, maybe you could just do like a REST API request for whatever the value is. So like the value in this case would be like each individual item within the data set that gets returned by the query. And then I think like value.url would probably be the most appropriate thing to do there. So you could do an API request there, and then that actually starts to return binary results because we're fetching an image. But yeah, so the workflow builder, it's definitely fresh out the kitchen. It's a little, it's still a little bit raw when you start to try it out. But if you'd like to try to do essentially Zapier with JavaScript and build out some backend workflows, again, you can send me an email at kevin.winery@retool.com, and I'd be happy to give you access this week before the rest of the world gets access to it. So with that, I think that's actually the time that I have for this morning. But I do have a few more minutes to hang out. If folks have questions in the chat, I'm happy to answer any of those types of questions. So let me know if there's anything that you would like to dive into a little bit further. But other than that, I'm just really stoked to be able to share a little bit about the platform with you this morning. And also hoping that you try out Retool a little bit. There are some Global Hack Week challenges that are available that'll help you kind of dive into using Retool a little bit more deeply. Yeah, so hopefully you'll check some of those out. I'm also just at Kevin Winnery on Twitter. So if you wanted to ask me any questions there, feel free to do that too. But yeah, really appreciate everyone's time this morning. All right. Seeing none in the chat, we'll probably get Rosendo back. But yeah, I definitely appreciate your time and the ability to hang out this morning. Thanks, Rosendo.
Yeah. No worries. Thanks for being here, Kevin. Really informative session. Yeah, as Himanshu here says, really insightful. I saw a lot of excitement in the chat here. And once again, just to reiterate, let's see here. It looks like we do have a question.
Yeah. So question about like, could you build something with Retool and then just have like a public URL for folks to use it? That is definitely a thing you can do. There's a option to make one of your applications public, and that will give you like a unique URL that you could just share with whoever. And there have been some like pretty interesting hacks that we've seen there. Like somebody's built like a local brewery finder application in Retool that just kind of like hits these different APIs to show you where you can find breweries, and also uses Untapped, I think it is, to like show the different like beers that are on tap at various locations. So it's definitely possible to do it. The reason why it's like primarily for internal tools is that like because it's like drag and drop, and like a lot of the components are kind of pre-configured to look a certain way. Oftentimes, like for a consumer-facing application, you probably wouldn't use something like Retool. You'd maybe like build your application in Next.js and have like full control over your CSS and stuff like that. But for those applications where you just where it's very much about the data and that sort of thing, Retool ends up being a perfect fit for that. But you totally can use it for public-facing applications as well.
Great question.
Indeed.
Yes, UI stuff, exactly. What I will say here is we do have a ton of challenges, as Kevin mentioned. So there will be one every day of the week until Friday. So check today's out. Make sure that you check out the Discord channel where some people are sharing their completions to their challenges. So that's going to be on the MLH Discord as well. And outside of that, really, like once again, thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate you having you here. Really appreciate your time. And for the rest of y'all that came and joined, really thank you so much for making Global Hack Week as spectacular as it always is. Nice global crowd in the room today, so really appreciate that as well. That being said, we're going to go ahead and sign off. We will see you again in 20 minutes. So, all right. Later, y'all.
Later, folks.